Motion is literally all around us, right? But think about it. How often do we really stop and just describe how something is moving without jumping straight to the why? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're diving into kinematics. And trust me, it's way more than just a chapter in a physics book. It's a whole new way of seeing change itself. Okay, this quote right here, this is basically the key to the whole thing. Kinematics, the geometry of change before causation is invoked. Just let that sink in for a second. It's all about the pure, unadulterated description of how things move. We're putting the why on a shelf for now. This is all about observation before explanation. So here's the roadmap for our journey today. First, we'll get a handle on this whole idea of the geometry of change. Then we're going to learn its language, its basic vocabulary. Once we have that down, we can start describing all the incredible shapes of movement out there. Then, and only then, are we going to peek behind the curtain and get a glimpse of the why. And we'll wrap it all up by looking at the deeper layers of meaning behind it all. Sound good? Let's go. All right, first up, the geometry of change. Now here's your challenge for this first part, and it's a simple one. You have to resist the urge to ask why. Seriously, for now, we are laser focused on just one thing, describing the what and the how of motion. That's it. So what is kinematics, really? At its core, it's the study of motion, but, and this is the important part, independent of the forces that cause it. It's kind of like looking at the blueprint for a skyscraper. Before you can even begin to understand the physics of why it stands up, you first have to describe its shape, its height, its angles, its geometry. Well, kinematics, that's the blueprint for movement. Okay, so to actually build that blueprint, to read it, we need to learn the language. And that brings us perfectly into our second section, the language of motion. If we want to describe how the universe moves with any kind of precision, these are the core words we absolutely have to know. First, word up, displacement. And listen, this is a really crucial distinction to make. Displacement is not the total distance you traveled. Nope. It's just the straight line vector from where you started to where you ended. Think about it. If you run a full lap around a 400-meter track, you run a distance of 400 meters for sure. But your displacement? It's zero. Zilch. Because you ended up right back where you started. With displacement, only the net change matters. All right, next up, we've got velocity. And all this is the rate at which your displacement is changing. But here's the key thing to remember. Velocity is a vector. That means it has to have both a magnitude, which is your speed, and a direction. So saying you're going 60 miles per hour is just telling me your speed. But if you say you're going 60 miles per hour north, now you're talking about velocity. See? It's a much more complete picture of what's happening. And that brings us to the really interesting one, acceleration. This is just the rate of change of velocity. So any change to your velocity counts. Speeding up, that's acceleration. Slowing down, also acceleration. Even just turning a corner while keeping the same speed. Yep, you're accelerating because your direction is changing. And this is where things start to get really juicy. Because even though we're still ignoring the why, acceleration is like the first big flashing clue that a cause must exist somewhere in the background. So you can see this whole beautiful hierarchy of change starting to form. You've got your position, just where something is. The change in position gives you velocity. The change in velocity gives you acceleration. And believe it or not, we can go even one level deeper. The rate of change of acceleration is something called jerk. You know that sudden lurch you feel when an elevator takes off or slams to a halt? That feeling? That's jerk. It's literally the measure of how abruptly the motion is changing. Okay, so we've got our vocabulary down, we have the language. Now let's have some fun and see what kinds of things we can actually describe with it. Welcome to part 3, the shapes of movement. I like to think of these as the different genres of stories our new language can tell. Let's start with 2 of the big ones. First, you have linear motion. This is as simple as it gets, right? An object is moving in a perfectly straight line. It's our baseline. But then you have circular motion. And this is where things get really cool. See, an object can be moving in a circle at a perfectly constant speed, but because its direction is constantly changing, its velocity is also constantly changing. And what do we say a change in velocity is? It's acceleration. So an object in circular motion is always accelerating toward the center. This is where our everyday intuition starts to break down a little, and things get a lot more interesting. And once we have those basics, we can start to describe all these beautiful, classic patterns of movement. You've got projectile motion. That's what gives you the perfect, graceful arc of a basketball heading for the hoop. You've got harmonic motion. Think of the steady, hypnotic rhythm of a pendulum swinging back and forth. And then there's uniform motion. That's the ideal, perfect coast of a spaceship gliding through the vacuum of deep space, no forces acting on it. Each one of these is like a unique signature, a geometric fingerprint. Okay, so we've held off for long enough. It's time to peek behind the curtain. We're now in section 4, where we are finally glimpsing the why. Because here's the thing, while kinematics is all about the what, it builds this incredible, sturdy bridge that leads us directly to the world of causes, the world of dynamics. And this quote, man, this is just such a poetic and powerful way to put it. Force is the generative shadow behind observed acceleration. Think about that imagery. You will never find the word force in a pure kinematics equation. It's not there. But every single time you see and describe an acceleration, you are describing the effect of a force. The acceleration is the shadow you can see and measure. The force is the unseen object that's casting it. So, what are the things that live on this bridge between kinematics and dynamics? Well, first, there is inertia. That's kind of the default assumption in kinematics, that an object's motion is just going to keep on keeping on, unless something messes with it. Then you have energy, which is like a hidden currency that motion carries. It's the capacity to do work that something has because it's moving. And finally, you have the big one, Newton's laws. These are the formal rules of the game. They are the bedrock axioms that officially connect the acceleration we can describe with the force that we now know is causing it. All right, for our final section, let's zoom all the way out. We're going to look at the layers of meaning to really appreciate just how deep and fundamental this whole idea of kinematics actually is. So you see, kinematics isn't just one simple thing. It's working on all these different levels at once. On a philosophical level, you could call it epistemic, it's a discipline. It forces us to describe reality before we try to explain it. On a really fundamental ontological level, it takes things like space, time, and continuity for granted. They're the primitives, the building blocks. Analytically, well, its native language is differential calculus, which is literally the mathematics of change. And then, of course, on the physical level, it's the foundation, the absolute bedrock upon which all of Newtonian mechanics is built. So if there's one thing you take away from all of this, let it be this. Kinematics is so much more than a bunch of equations on a chalkboard. It is a fundamental, disciplined framework for seeing the world. It's a way of thinking that says, hang on, before we jump to conclusions, let's just describe what is actually happening as precisely and as honestly as we can. It's the very lens through which we perceive and describe change itself. So I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. If kinematics is the script, the literal language that describes every single motion in the universe, from a single leaf falling from a tree to entire galaxies colliding, then what's the story that the universe is trying to tell us with it? What is this grand narrative being written in the geometry of change? Once you start looking for it, I promise you'll start to see that story unfolding absolutely everywhere. Thanks for tuning in.